Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Cool. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We're going to wait just a minute, let others join, and then we'll begin today's discussion. All right, we know we are in the middle of your work days as well as your teaching days, and we're so grateful for you to come in and spend some time with us. So we'll give it another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll get started. Okay, so welcome to the latest installment of Homeroom with Education Leaders. Today's conversation is focused on public dollars, private choices, school choice in 2024. My name is Kristen Green. I'm the director of the K-12 team here at the Hunt Institute. And for those unfamiliar with the Hunt Institute, we were founded by four-term North Carolina Governor Jim Hunt. We serve as a resource for policymakers on education issues across the education spectrum through in-person and virtual convenings, research, and other forms of technical assistance. Before getting the conversation started, I want to provide a brief logistical overview. We'll start the discussion with about a 30-minute moderated discussion with our panelists, and then we'll pivot to a Q&A with the audience. If you have any questions throughout the discussion, please feel free to submit them using the Q&A feature on the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll do our best to address them real time during the session. Additionally, we will record this conversation in the next couple of days posted to our YouTube channel. We also encourage you to join us on Twitter, where you can participate in the conversation using the hashtag #EdHomeroom. And speaking of today's conversation, we're so appreciative to the panelists who are joining us today. Okay, we'll go ahead and kick it off. So according to the Hunt Institute's 2023 Across the Aisle survey, just under half of voters support using public dollars for school vouchers, and a majority of voters support using public dollars for education savings accounts. These levers for private school choice and their role in the future of public education have been a growing topic of conversation around the country. As more and more states explore pathways for expanding school choice, either through vouchers, tax credits, or the fastest growing trend, education savings accounts, it is vital that policymakers grapple with and investigate the importance of long-term impact of such initiatives. So in recognition of this importance, today's conversation will discuss how these programs may impact families, public schools, rural communities, and the school choice debate at large. So to that end, I'm pleased to introduce our speakers today. Superintendent Dr. Christina Grant is the State Superintendent of Education in Washington, D.C., and also a current Hunt Cain Leadership Fellow. So we're excited to have you here today, Dr. Grant. Thank you. We have Dr. Dave Wells. He's a research director at Grand Canyon Institute. And we have Dr. Patrick Wolf, a distinguished professor of education policy and the 21st Century Endowed Chair in School Choice at the University of Arkansas. So Dr. Wolf, Dr. Wells, Dr. Grant, can't wait to have this conversation with you. All right, we're going to kick off with Superintendent Grant. We're going to talk about DC school lottery system. So how does DC school lottery system provide parents with equity and access?
Great. And first, thanks for being here. Thanks for putting together this conversation. It's top of mind. We are in actual school choice season in Washington, D.C. We have a robust, arguably, I'd say historic. In 2013, we consolidated our entire lottery system so that we could create what we now call My School DC, where our families all across the system, public and public charter, really do go through a robust matching system where parents get to step back, they leverage our website. We have a comprehensive school report card process where families can compare schools, they can look at options, and year over year, they go through a process of being matched to a school of their choice. And we're really excited that year over year, the first match rate continues to improve. Since 2013, we've matched over 150,000 students. And as you can imagine, it wasn't uncommon years ago that parents would have to take days off work. They'd have to go school to school, sit on wait list to wait list. And in the advances of technology, it's really exciting that we have huge enrollment fairs throughout the district, and then parents step back and they make their choices, and we get our learners into the school of their choice. For us, this process, this vision, this work was ensuring that we had equitable access to the great set of schools we have in the district, and that our students who were most vulnerable had access to schools that could prove to be transformational in their lives. Super sorry. I think overall, we really see this work in the larger conversation around choice. If we believe that parents are the first teacher, we want to make sure that parents have as much information about the wide array of options that exist across the district, and that they will be able to use that information to make the choices for their students. It's been exciting to see how it plays out. And if you are from the district, our lottery application closes on February 1st. And so, please visit our website, look at our great options, and reach out to us if you have any questions or concerns.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. The lag is real sometimes. Okay, appreciate that. So kind of shifting into that conversation about school voucher programs, as a principal investigator of the school choice demonstration project, Dr. Wolf, you have led longitudinal evaluations of school voucher programs nationwide. Are there any major trends in how states approach private school choice? And if so, what do you think the long-term impact of those trends will be?
Sure. There have been two important pivots in the area of private school choice of late. So private school choice is an umbrella term that includes three distinct mechanisms for providing parents with resources that support their selection of a private school enrollment for their child. And those are school vouchers, tax credit scholarships, and education savings accounts. For the first 3 decades, really, of school choice, the voucher model and to a lesser extent, the tax credit scholarship model were the primary models for supporting school choice. And both of those models only provide resources for private school tuition and fees. But lately, we've seen a major pivot from the introduction of the first tax credit scholarship program in 2012. Education savings account program in 2012 in Florida to the present. We now have 15 tax credit or education savings account modeled private school choice programs across the country. And what they do is they provide a pot of money for parents to secure a variety of educational services and products for their child from a variety of vendors. And that gives much greater flexibility to customize the child's education. So ESAs really they're sort of like the iPhone of the school choice environment these days, because they have so much flexibility. The second pivot has been from choice programs targeted to students with certain disadvantages. The first 3 decades of school choice, most of the programs were limited to students from low-income families or who had disabilities. But recently, there has been a swift growth in the number of school choice programs that have universal eligibility. Basically, we've gone from 0 in 2019 to 10 statewide programs today where every K-12 student is eligible. So those have been the two main shifts, and basically what they mean for the future is that there will be more students participating in private school choice programs. The educational models and programs being delivered to them will be a lot more diverse and multifaceted. I think there's going to be a lot of growth in course choice, where students will be taking some courses from their neighborhood public school and other courses from private providers, and all of it funded through ESAs. It's going to be a growing and diversifying field.
Thank you, Dr. Wolf. Appreciate it. So we'll kind of build off of the eligibility and choice part of that conversation. So Dr. Wells, since 2011, Arizona has allowed families to enroll in education savings accounts. And in 2022, student eligibility was expanded universally. What effects do you anticipate the rise in enrollment in education savings accounts will have on student academic performance?
Thanks for the question. And just to give people some sort of broader overview, because Arizona has been sort of a leader in the school choice area for quite a while. So we have, first of all, we have open enrollment, which means that students can enroll in other district schools outside their neighborhood school. And we've had charter schools in Arizona for more than 25 years. And we have the most charter school students outside of DC as a percent of the total students. And then we've had both the scholarship accounts that Professor Wolf referred to, and that's been going on for more than 20 years. And again, in the last like 12 years, we've had these ESAs. So just we have quite a few things going on, and they became universal 2 years ago. And so this is the second year of that. Now, with all that choice, one of the arguments is that we should get better outcomes. And one of the on one level, we've been a real failure on that, because one way I look at that is at high school graduation rates. Because if these were successful programs, one of the things that we should see is that the high school graduation rate in Arizona, especially relative to the country as a whole, should have improved. And it hasn't. Our high school graduation rate is still below 80%. And has stayed that way for a long time, as long as I've been here. And meanwhile, the national one hasn't been improving, and it's around 85%. So we haven't, on that level, we still have a low college going rate, and we still have a lower high school graduation rate. So on that level, they haven't been successful. And in Arizona, these choice programs have, unlike some of the early ones that focused on the inner city, they've always focused much more on suburban families than the inner city. But the new programs don't have the accountability that our charter schools do. So there's the Center for Research and Educational Outcomes at Stanford that looks at charter schools, and what they try to do is they try to map kids in the charter school sector with an equivalent kid in the district school sector to try to see how charter schools are performing. And they find some charter schools do really well, other ones do poorly. They find online charter schools are particularly poor. We don't have anything like that in our private school environment. And so one of the challenges that we have is when they created this program, they never created any kind of accountability measure for the private schools. So there's never been a real study in Arizona about that. There have been studies with mixed results of private school vouchers elsewhere. And often, I think most commonly we've seen in math concerns, so like the Fordham Institute, which is generally supportive of these programs, found in Ohio, for instance, that the math performance of the students was really poor. And they've had some of those similar issues in New Orleans. And I think that's the thing that we're concerned about, because if you're a kid, it's wonderful to have all these choices, but you only get to be in fourth grade once. And if that experience isn't as positive as it could have been, you don't want to really repeat fourth grade. So we'd like to see a better measures for that. That's something that we're trying, because we actually do want to see how well this is impacting kids, and we're having a really hard time finding the data for it.
Thank you, Dr. Wells. We actually have a question in the Q&A. And Dr. Grant, I'd love you or Dr. Wolf to think of it as it applies to your work and potentially in an urban school environment. Dr. Wells, how does universal eligibility relate to equity initiatives for those targeted student groups that we're talking about?
We think it actually has undermined equity initiatives for a couple reasons. One is again, they've been primarily geared toward somewhat higher income, higher than median income families in terms of who makes most use of these programs. Part of that is there's no transportation involved with these programs, so there's one of it. But the other part is it undermines our overall funding scheme, because we have a thing called an equalization formula that where lower income districts are supposed to get more money from the state, and they do get more money from the state. A higher income district like Scottsdale, which is probably a place you've all heard of, doesn't get any money from the state. It's all local property taxes. But a lot of kids in Scottsdale also are going to charter schools and private schools. And all of that money is either money that directly comes from the state fund, or if it's a tax credit, it's something that's been diverted from the state fund. And so it's therefore undermining the total amount of money in the general fund that could be going to lower income students. So we think that's been a problem in our current setup.
Sorry, I was trying to get off mute. One would think after so much time, we'd be able to land that. Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. We work within our lottery system. I should step back and say we have a common lottery board and a set of individuals that oversee the system, approve changes to the system, and are ensuring that having access and achieving equity sit at the foundation of the system. We also have a set of preferences inside the lottery that ensure that students who are furthest away from opportunity actually have different preferential weights in the lottery, such that they would have a better chance of being matched with their first choice. And we work with the Common Lottery Board to continue to refine and improve the system so that the children who we would want to ensure that they have this high level of access, achieve that through the matching process in the lottery. So it's a really good question.
Yes, and I just add to that equity components in private school choice programs are a question of policy design. And there are several design elements in choice programs across the country that are geared toward promoting equity. For example, the North Carolina Opportunity Scholarship Program, the value of the voucher provided under that program varies based on family income. So students at or below the poverty level get the maximum voucher amount, and then that amount is reduced on a sliding scale for higher income families. So that's one way to target more resources to students with more educational challenges. It can be built into the policy, and that's just a question of design.
Great. Thank y'all. Appreciate the answers. And that teases up really nicely to shift into the second part that's a little more conversational collectively. So we appreciate you giving your insights so far. So I'd love to ask a follow-up for all of you. And as I do that, just a reminder, the Q&A session's going really well. So if y'all can keep putting your questions in there for our panelists. It's at the bottom of your Zoom screen, so just click on that. From what we've heard so far, it's evident that ensuring students have access to quality education is critical for improving outcomes and setting students up for lifelong success. We're also aware that significant challenges exist for states and districts trying to provide quality education that caters to all students' diverse needs. From your experiences, how can leaders still provide parents with flexible schooling options while still ensuring that our educational systems account for the needs of diverse students across the nation? Dr. Grant, we'll jump in with you first, since you are currently on the phone for school days and looking at the diverse needs of everyone.
I was like, you can start with others. No, I mean, I think we work really, really hard, and DC, it's great to hear us referenced in other conversations. I think we really do provide an excellent example of how we can provide families with flexible school options while also meeting diverse needs of families and students. We have, for us to just, be a city that should be a state with 700,000 residents, we have a wide array of options and choice for families. We have traditional public schools, public charters. We do have a set of private schools, independent schools, and they serve a range of student needs. We also have a set of schools with specific focus, from Chinese or Hebrew dual language immersion to Montessori environments. We have online schools, and we're rethinking high school through the development of our advanced technical centers. So those are school models within the larger ecosystem where children from across different high schools, across different governance structures are coming to a central location, getting CTE training by university professors, earning dual enrollment credit, CTE certification, and, you know, being put on the path to their post-secondary success. And so it's one of the reasons our lottery system exists is so that families understand the vast array of options. We're not just talking about one elementary school as it's different from another. We really do drill down deep on our state report card so families can understand these are the IB schools, these are AP schools, and these are the type of advanced placement exams being offered, a wide array of options in a short or a smaller geographical footprint. It makes us nimble enough to really meet the needs of our parents. So I'll stop there.
Dr. Wolf, Dr. Wells.
Well, I'll jump in here quickly. I think the central motivation for school choice, both in the form of private school choice and charter schooling, private schools, open enrollment, all that, the central motivation is the realization that one size doesn't fit all when it comes to K-12 education. That students differ dramatically in their educational needs and in the kind of school program and the kind of school environment that's going to be the best fit for them. So what we've seen is, as Dr. Grant described in Washington, D.C., in many places across the country, we've seen an explosion of different schooling models, very distinctive public and private schools that are well designed to serve students with particular needs. So I think the way to look at it is, does the whole set of choices available to parents in a given area cover the distinctive needs of the students in the population? And when that doesn't occur, then you have to get really creative. Policymakers and parents and practitioners have to get really creative about crafting, you know, some sort of arrangement. And micro schools is one arrangement that has emerged in the wake of the pandemic to deal with small subpopulations of students who might need a highly customized and very personal form of K-12 instruction.
Thank you, Dr. Wolf.
I think to add to the conversation, we see a wide variety of schools in Arizona. So there are a number of parents who have special needs children who have found private schools that have been helpful for their kids, and I mean, these kids often have a higher amount of the voucher that goes with them because it's based off the school funding formula. Charter schools have a wide variety, from extreme college prep ones such as BASIS to ones that focus in on arts. There's an Arizona School for the Arts. And district schools have also responded by making some of their schools different. There's a school nearby who's been converted into a Montessori elementary school. I think that goes to K-8. They also create choice schools, which are usually supposed to be more academically oriented. But I think the one thing that's sort of missing in all this is the transportation piece, because Phoenix is a widespread place. We have a very poor public transportation overall. It's not very well structured. So people who don't have reliable cars are and transportation are really left out, which is generally our lower income folks. So they're not able to access these same kind of choices that people who have more means are able to.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Walls. So one of the questions from the audience, just as a kind of broader framing, is how do voucher programs differ from other school of choice programs like educational savings accounts?
Okay, well, I'll take that. And so school vouchers were the original mechanism for increasing access to private schools of choice for parents. You could argue that a form of school voucher started in Vermont and Maine back in the 1870s because a lot of rural areas of those states had small private high schools and junior high schools, but they didn't have the critical mass for a public junior high or high school. And so the state policymakers decided, well, we'll just pay the tuition of the private schools. It was called town tuitioning. We'll pay the tuition of the private schools in these rural areas that don't have the critical mass for public schools. So those were the original model for state dollars supporting enrollments in private schools. The modern school voucher program began with a pilot program in Milwaukee in 1990. And what's definitional about school vouchers is that the voucher amount only can be used to cover private school tuition and mandatory school fees. So it's limited in what it can provide, and it's really just designed to facilitate enrollments in brick and mortar private schools. Education savings accounts are very different. They're a lot like the flexible spending accounts that many families have to cover out-of-pocket medical expenses or childcare expenses, because with an ESA, a parent can buy a variety of things. It can cover private school tuition. And typically about 2/3 of the parents participating in ESA programs use all the funds just for private school tuition and fees. But about 1/3 of the parents fully customize their child's education and use those funds to pay for tutoring, to pay for online course material, to pay for educational technology, to pay for therapies for students with disabilities. So basically, each state with an ESA program will specify an extensive list of qualified educational expenses. And then they also will certify a set of qualified education providers who can provide those educational materials and services to students. And then parents can pull together the total educational program that they want for their child from those multiple providers. So it's just a lot more versatile and adaptable and customizable for a given child's education.
Thank you, Dr. Oh yeah, Dr. Walls.
I just chime in that sometimes those expenses can become controversial because like some parents might pay for a trampoline or dancing lessons and things that the state ends up paying for that other parents don't have to pay for by themselves. And so there's a lot of a gray space in there that becomes can be pretty controversial, and that's come forward a number of times in Arizona.
Thank you all for weighing in on that. In keeping with the kind of the broader question, we've had a couple of questions in here about the effectiveness of school choice programs. So kind of summing those up high level, the impact and effectiveness of school choice programs and policies vary based on multiple factors, as we know, including ensuring program accessibility for all students and then establishing that transparency in the reporting of academic performance. What factors do you think state policymakers should focus on to hold the programs accountable and ensure quality in that choice process?
Well, I'll start things off. I'm sure my colleagues will have a lot to add. You know, I'm an evaluator, and I've performed a lot of the evaluations of school voucher programs, including in Washington, D.C., in Louisiana, in Milwaukee, and elsewhere. From a design standpoint, I think the regulation that is probably going to carry the most water in terms of ensuring a sufficiently high quality education is provided to students is the requirement that every private school participating in a choice program be accredited, have an official accreditation from a reputable accreditation agency. The accreditation process is sort of a quality control challenge to a private school to ensure that its teachers are qualified, to ensure that it has an appropriate and expansive curriculum that it's delivering to students, and to ensure that its school leadership is well qualified and experienced to lead the school. So I support requirements that private schools have accreditation in order to deliver educational services to children through private school choice programs. I think, there is a danger if you go beyond and layer a lot of regulations on private schools. There's a danger that many of the high quality private schools won't participate. They won't accept that deal under the conditions offered. That's what we saw in Louisiana in my evaluation of the Louisiana Scholarship Program. It had a very robust set of government regulations, including the state superintendent could just flat out declare a private school inadequate and prevent it from participating in the program. And so 2/3 of the private schools in Louisiana chose not to participate. And it wasn't a random sample of private schools, it was the higher quality ones. And that left only, the private schools on the lower end, the performance distribution, to deliver educational services to students through that program. And so it was really not a big surprise that their educational test scores and achievements suffered as a result. So I think we just have to be careful. I'm certainly not a supporter of no regulation of private schools and choice programs. I'm a supporter of smart regulation, and I think that the accreditation requirement is the best approach to get a lot of bang for your buck in regulating private schools.
I mean, I think there are a couple other areas of things. So with charter schools, it's a privilege basically for a private operator to operate a public school, and they have to get a charter from the state or the regulator. And the idea is that they have less regulation though. And one of the things we've pushed on the charter school level has been more accountability and including financial accountability, because charters are able to engage in what we call self-dealing. You can contract with yourself. These are actions that would be illegal for a district school official to do, to contract with somebody, a company that they own. There's no regulation of that in the private school area, and we'd like to see a lot more financial accountability as well, so that there are audits that are made public. There's a reporting. We don't know what % of money is going into the classroom for private schools or anything like that, or how much teachers are paid. I think a lot of that trying to transparency would be helpful. I think the one thing our one currency for measuring school success often ends up being test scores. And since there's no required testing either for our private schools, we don't have anything from the grades 3 through 8, which is the normal ways in which we would measure the effectiveness of a lot of schools, even though there's a lot of issues with standardized tests. We don't have anything like that, no currency thing to try to measure what's happening. And we know, since some of them are religious schools, they have a religious doctrine in terms of what their actual curriculum is. So they're focusing in on creationism or something like that. So there's certain things that they're very free to teach whatever they want to. And I think those are things that we have some concerns about.
Yeah, I would just echo in on what both of my co-panelists have shared. The tension is around how are you ensuring that we have high quality, consistent standards for all students across all schools? And then what role do we play in sharing transparent data around performance, et cetera, and literally controlling for all of the things that Dr. Wells has just shared? I think that's the tension in this. You should, or I support, as Dr. Wolf said, having regulatory functions if you were to go this route. That is what we see in high performing charter sectors, that authorizers do a really tremendous job of ensuring that the usage of the public dollar is benefiting the need of the student or the family. And that's the tension of the work that should exist if we're going to leverage public dollars in this way.
Thank you, Dr. Grant, Dr. Wells, Dr. Wolf. Directly related, we have a question from the audience. So what are some of the best examples of effective adaptation by traditional public schools to the expansion of school choice?
Well, I'll kick things off again. It is one of the most persistent findings in the research on school choice is that when competition is launched or expanded due to choice programs in an area, the test scores of students who remain in public schools tend to go up. So it's a very consistent finding that public schools respond in constructive ways to competitive pressure from choice programs. There's very little research identifying specifically what they do to achieve those higher test scores in response to competition. But there's some evidence to suggest that they pursue three strategies. One is much more extensive and involved communication with parents. And that makes sense because, ultimately, education, successful K-12 education is a three-legged stool. And the three legs are the student, the parent, and the school. And so better communication among those three is likely to lead to better outcomes for students. The second strategy that they pursue is developing new programs to serve distinctive student populations, the needs of distinctive student populations in their school, as a way to retain those students and prevent them from leaving and going to a school of choice. And the third, which is the toughest in most cases, is removing the lowest performing teachers from the classroom and replacing them with higher quality teachers. That can be very difficult to do in the public sector, given a number of constraints, personnel constraints. But when public schools are faced with competition from choice, the school leaders are more likely to improve the quality of their teaching force.
All right, thank you, Dr. Wolf. We have a couple of questions that are more specific towards certain groups of students. So we'll kind of shift into that and talk about students who are homeschooled. So how are public funds being used to support homeschooled students? And how does this impact the equity and quality of the work that they're getting at home?
I guess I'll chime in there. So we do oversee all of the processes and procedures for students that are opting for homeschooling. And I think the challenge there is we respect the parents' right to, participate in homeschool or be a part of homeschool programs and, support funds as needed. I think the tension there are certain aspects of the public or public charter school system that families would want in, but not the entire system. And so it is a real tension that we wrestle with when families are exploring homeschooling options. But we are supportive of a parent's right to make that decision. I don't know how that plays out with amongst either of my other colleagues, but right now we have 1,100 or so students who are participating in the homeschooling program, and we take those families through the regulatory process of ensuring that they are, aligned with our standards, the requirements for graduation, et cetera. And we support those families as they have needs.
In Arizona, I think we're not quite sure how many kids are in homeschooling environments because of the lack of transparency in terms of the thing. We know that when they introduced universal vouchers, which included homeschooling, the number has gone up from about 30,000 participants to closer to 80,000 participants, and a number of those are homeschoolers. I know that some of the district schools provide some services or extracurriculars so that they can participate in things like band and things like that. But there's, and I know that operators like Prenda have come in for these micro schools too, but there's not a lot of oversight in terms of like questions about like what the credentials are of what's being provided and so forth. Because I mean, a number of our people may have read the book by Tara Westover called Educated, where she was homeschooled, and the idea is that when there's a lack of oversight, that you have also potential abuses, and I think that's a concern that we have, that there's not enough oversight or support to make sure that it's acceptable education for the kids.
So the latest reliable counts on homeschooling nationally are that currently 4.7% of K-12 students are being educated in homeschools across the country. It varies quite a bit by state, and the regulation of homeschooling varies pretty dramatically by state. And also whether or not homeschool students are eligible for school choice programs varies substantially by state. There are many private school choice programs where students are not allowed to take the funds if they are homeschooled. But the ESA model, again, sort of shows its flexibility in that it's much easier to provide resources to homeschool students through an ESA structure than it is through a tuition voucher or a tax credit scholarship, because many of the components of a typical ESA arrangement are the kinds of components that a lot of homeschool families draw upon to build the homeschooling experience for their child, like individual tutors, like online course material, education technology, educational field trips, science equipment for home experiments, things like that. So ESAs do make it easier for public policy to support students being educated at home, but still not every ESA program is available to homeschool students. That varies based on the explicit elements of state law.
Thank you, Dr. Wolf. So kind of all-encompassing for the types of student profiles that we're serving, how can choice programs better serve historically underserved students, including students of color, low income, students with disabilities, and English language learners?
I mean, I would just quickly, the choice is only as good as the choice, and a parent's ability to navigate that system is only as strong as truly them having access to what they're signing up for. And, it's one of the reasons why I speak at length about our report card system. It was critically important that families were able to have access to many of the things that were raised in this conversation. Will this option meet the needs of my child, dependent upon where we live, what the child is interested in, where they would want to go. It's always a fascinating process where you see a child attend a school and the parent will say, or the caregiver will say, oh, we picked this school because of this. And it's not always the metric or the item that's like front of mind. Sometimes it isn't the school that's closest to where they live. It's the school that has this unique aspect of learning that is really important to the child or the family. And so I know that my co-panelists will dive in deeper to this response, but the top framing, regardless of the option, is how do we ensure that families who are furthest away from opportunity deeply understand what option they are choosing. And that's where transparency is critically important, because we want to avoid a family signing up for something that sounds good. I mean, that's what took place at the beginning of the charter school movement. Families thought like charter equals better. And that's not always true, depending on the need of the actual child and the family. And that's why we push ourselves to have, I was excited to hear about micro schools. We chartered and authorized our first micro school in the district, because the goal is to have as many options to meet the needs of our families and to make sure they deeply understand what they're signing up for, because that wrong choice impacts the life of a child. And I think that's what we sometimes miss in these conversations. Children they only get one shot at third grade. And so we have to make sure that families are truly clear about what they're signing up for. And, I'm the face of regulation in this conversation. We have to make sure that we're holding all the entities accountable that are using public dollars in a way that best will meet the needs of the children we hope to serve.
Yes, I want to build on the excellent points that Dr. Grant just made. What we've found in our research on school choice is that parents crave accurate and useful information about the school choices available to them. And they typically get that information, from 4 sources. Now, of course, one is the school itself, and school visits are absolutely critical, because when parents can see the school environment and school operations with their own eyes, and if they visit multiple schools and do comparison shopping, we find that the outcomes are better for their child. So they make a better choice if they are informed through multiple school visits. Now, that takes a lot of time and effort. So school fairs help somewhat, where it's kind of like speed dating. But you'll see that certainly in the next week. Next week is National School Choice Week, and many communities around the country will be celebrating National School Choice Week by hosting school fairs where parents can get a lot of information about the educational choices available to them in one place, one-stop shopping. So that's a valuable resource. A third is school guides. And most choice-rich communities have a nonprofit organization that develops and distributes school guides. My School Chooser is a very popular one in multiple places. And what they provide is a mix of quantitative descriptive data and also sort of characterizations of the distinctiveness of schools. So performance data plus a description of how this school is going to be different than other schools. Basically, we're moving away from parents directly encountering the school as we move from school visits to school guides. But at least it is useful information developed by an unbiased source that is convenient to parents to read. And one of the sources of information that parents value the most about school choice is information from other parents. So they can get that online sometimes in chat groups, and they can also get it sometimes through these school guides and through their own networks, through churches, through community centers. These parent information and parent empowerment groups can be an excellent source of information because parents are going to trust other parents a lot more than they're going to trust just, the words of education providers.
Yeah, when I was smiling because it's the reason why we call it EdFest, but it's a massive school enrollment fair. And we separate the pre-K-8 schools from the high schools because, fun fact, high schoolers talk to other high schoolers. And it's fun in real time to see those matches. Like kids come out and they're like, I'm going to this school next year. And it creates that palpable energy. But other things we do here in our traditional system is feeder patterns allow students to, like an 8th grade student can take the day off of school and go spend the day, literally spending the day in a high school that they're choosing from. And those are the types of opportunities that we have to create to ensure equity and access for all of our students. So from a regulatory space, you are not absent from school if you are actually taking the day off to spend the day as a student, really immersing yourself in the environment that you will be in, arguably for the next 4 years. And those are the types of opportunities that students who have access to means traditionally, it's like when we go for college, we would get in the car and our parents would take us all across the country to visit a school. We have to create environments for all children at all levels of access to do that throughout their pre-K-12 continuum. And then it's our job, or at least I would say here in DC, we take very seriously the design of our statewide report card system, the types of information that, to Dr. Wolf's point, it's the enrollment fair, the online system, school guides, and then the actual funding of the competition, right? We make a big deal out of making sure that all of our schools can be the best option for the parent that needs them. And that's a push that choice really has created, the dynamism in our system now where folks know parents and students vote with their feet. It's our job, or my job, to make sure that they're voting for the best option regardless of what they choose. But we don't talk about that enough. And so we also get excited about School Choice Week, because in our charter sector, we want to make sure that families, we work really hard to have these options. We want to make sure we're making the right matches.
I want to pick up on the funding part of it. So, so in Arizona, we introduced an opportunity weight. Right now, it's a token opportunity weight. But opportunity weight is basically a higher funding amount in the state aid formula that goes to lower income kids. And the question was a lot about, kids, because basically you need a lot more resources to make those kids be successful. And if you put more of that money into the state funding formula, then that affects all of the choice options, because it helps the district schools, it helps the charter schools, and then our ESA grants are catered at 90% of what the kid would receive if he went to or she went to a charter school. And so the opportunity weight affects everybody, but right now it's a token one in Arizona. We did we had a grant funded project to look at exemplary charter schools, and one of the ones that we picked was Great Hearts. And Great Hearts provides basically a strong college preparatory classical approach, but and mostly they locate their schools in wealthier suburban areas, but they also chose to locate one in Maryvale, which is a lower income, highly Hispanic area of Phoenix. And what they discovered is it just was really hard to get an A. Their schools usually get an A because grades usually correspond with socioeconomic status. That one got a C, and they had to work really hard to get it up to a B, but they realized they did not have the resources coming in to the school that they really needed to provide the education they wanted. And I think it's really incumbent that if we really want to believe in equity, it's important that states and localities fund schools in appropriate ways, whether they're through the ESA program or through charter schools or district schools.
Thank you, Dr. Wells. We'll close out with one question that came through that talks about, as we're building off of what Dr. Grant, you said about the experiences and messaging and the access to different environments and that choice. We're going to talk about competition, and does it create isolation and artificial silos between those public and private schools? Each of your experiences in your research or in your real time, does viewing public and private sectors as parts of a symbiotic system increase the school's ability to equitably serve the student through collaboration?
I'll just say when it does, it's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've seen it. I think the initial, what we've seen sort of historically is when school choice suddenly emerges in a community that hasn't had school choice before, the initial response is more frosty and kind of siloed. And it's like, there's this thing from the outside that has disrupted our normal routines and our normal set of expectations. So I think there's a bit of wariness and defensiveness initially in communities when choice is a brand new thing. But as school choice just becomes part of the reality, I mean, I've heard this from multiple superintendents who are very innovative in their thinking, state school superintendents and district school superintendents. And they'll basically say, we realize school choice is the reality, and the competition that comes with it is the reality in K-12 education now. We want parents to be choosing our schools. We want the public schools to be schools of choice in this environment. And so there is this evolution to that perspective of accepting choice and embracing choice and designing strategies to make your school a school of choice. Collaboration is kind of the next step after that. And it requires this conceptualization that it's the responsibility of every education provider in the community to help provide an excellent education to every child in the community. So it's sort of a shared responsibility across institutions, across providers. And when you reach that level of understanding and acceptance of your mission, that's when we can see some really exciting collaborations. And that's why I strongly support policies like course choice that encourage collaboration between public schools and charter and private schools in providing education to individual students, and that appropriately reward and provide resources to every entity that is collaborating to deliver that customized education to a child. So you need the perspective and the attitude and the embrace of it being a symbiotic relationship, but then you also need the policies that send resources behind the services that are being provided to students from various sources.
Yeah, I mean, to build on that, I would say one thing that's slightly controversial and then perhaps something that's not, but certain families have always had access to choice. At the end of the day, some people can literally pack up and move to get access to what they want. In DC, we're really proud of the work we've done across our public and our public charter system. It's one of the urban centers in the country that we've had charters for over 20 years at this point. And we've unified our enrollment system. We've aligned our funding formula that have a range of equity weights. We're clear about course collection, and we're on a journey to ensure that we know every place that AP Math is teaching and how that course is going. When you think about the work of school choice, it's ensuring that parents have quality choice options. It actually doesn't matter. Even if you were to choose a private option that didn't meet your students' needs, couldn't serve their diverse learning needs, didn't put them on a path for post-secondary success, you had a choice, but it wasn't a choice that met your need. And so I think we have to stay the course along those lines. And then I could tell you here in DC, our schools come together across governance lines for a range of topics. We come into community of practice on attendance, English language, ELA instruction, et cetera, et cetera. And we do the work of ensuring that we're transparent about performance, we're providing resources as necessary, et cetera. And so it's work that continues to evolve, but we're really proud of where we find ourselves, particularly in a system where at this point, we are about 50-50 traditional public and public charter. And what I could tell you is this is the highest enrollment we've ever had in Washington, D.C. So even as we engage in a conversation about private choice options, et cetera, families by far and large are choosing the traditional system, be it public or public charter. And so our job is to build really, really strong options and then allow parents to choose. But I can't conceive of a day in the next 10 years where we would have the scale to give everyone a private option. Parents, by and large, are going to need a strong public school system. And we're really excited that we're able to provide that range of options here in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. We're going to kind of close out collectively. So one of the big takeaways that I wrote down from this is that we have a shared responsibility to educate children and provide the best opportunities that we can for them and provide families with choice. As you look at the landscape of school choice, when we're thinking into 2024, so a kickstart to the year, what's your one hope for how we can better support kids in the classroom and their families to ensure we're prepping kids for that post-secondary success? That's why we're all here. What's your one hope for 2024?
I'll go quickly, but unfortunately, our state adopted a flat tax and they gave all the money off to wealthier individuals. So we don't have money to fund our schools this next year. But if we did, we've asked for we have this token opportunity weight. We've been asking for it instead of being about $100 a kid for at least be $1,500 a kid, which still isn't enough, but it would be, that would be the one thing. I think the at-risk kids are the most important thing we ought to invest in.
My hope for 2024 is that legislatures that have passed robust school choice initiatives, either through charter expansions or through private school choice programs, really concentrate on these implementation challenges that can be barriers to full participation in those programs, like the transportation challenges that Dr. Wells mentioned earlier, and just kind of get down into the nuts and bolts of of making choice work for all families in their state.
My most pressing hope is that it doesn't snow tomorrow, but I'm not sure. Not sure I'm gonna get that hope. My hope for 24, I mean, is for us to continue, particularly at the State Education Agency, investing in the things that matter. So high access to high quality literacy training, like the things that make the work inside of our schools function better in service of our children. To this conversation, I think it's just going to be critically important for families to deeply understand the choices that they have. We are going to redesign our school report card and work with our State Board of Education this year and add even more content to families. My hope is really trying to turn the corner of deeply understanding what parents need to know as they're making their choice, and then doing the right amount of guidance, support, et cetera, as they make these critical choices. I'm a state superintendent that went to public, private, public, like I've had an interesting set of education options as a pre-K through 12 person, and it was all connected to the choices that my mom had in front of her at the time. And so we have to do a great job of making sure that the decision maker understands the choice and that we are holding the individuals accountable who are providing these services to our children. Because as one of my colleagues said, like, we don't want any child to have to do a grade again because we didn't give them the right choice the first time.
Thank you all so much. I can't think of a better way to end this panel and our discussion today. Thank you again for joining us and having such an engaging and open conversation. Before closing today's discussion, I do want to turn everyone to our upcoming webinars. So if you enjoyed today, we have a couple of phenomenal panelists coming up as well. Our next K-12 conversation will be held on Thursday, February 15th at 2 p.m. Eastern. We'll discuss the importance of elevating education by embracing cultural insights. We'll drop that registration link to the webinar in the chat, and we also encourage you to join us for other upcoming Hunt Institute webinars across our teams. And they're listed on the screen. You can register for these discussions by going to our website, which we'll post in the chat as well. Thank you all again for joining us today, wherever you are. We hope that the snow days are at a minimum, and we hope to see you again soon. All right, have a good one.